My name is Lauren Davina, and this is a story time about one of the most consequential things happening in the world right now that almost nobody is talking about. And when I say nobody, I mean anyone who isn't chronically online or living inside AI and tech 24/7. Even when I tell you what it is, you're probably gonna think it sounds unrelated to your life, but I assure you, it will affect your life. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but very likely in the next few years. And here it is, the thing that's gonna change everything: OpenClaw. Remember when Google changed how we found information? Or when people started using ChatGPT instead of Google for answers? OpenClaw is pointing to the next shift. And for those of you that have short attention spans and want the download in one beat, here it is. OpenClaw is an AI agent who can act, not just chat or answer questions. It can do things. It has a personality, a persistent memory, and access to tools. It even has a SOUL.md file. The technology behind this changes how we get work done, how scams happen, how power moves, and how much control you have over your own digital life. Now, you're probably wondering, if this is so important, why haven't I heard of it? And that's exactly the problem. Not many people are talking about OpenClaw. Not because it's a conspiracy, not because the tech overlords are hiding it, but because it's new, messy, and not instantly understandable. Meanwhile, disaster, outrage, celebrity hell, war, weather, that stuff is instantly understandable. OpenClaw just isn't. Nope, I am not trying to hype anything up. I am not in the tech world. Look me up. But as an artist and filmmaker, I find the story irresistible. It's messy and human and weird, and it touches identity, creativity, vulnerability, power, and trust. This is the oldest story in the book. Prometheus stealing fire, Frankenstein's monster. Someone builds something beautiful and terrifying and then has to reckon with what it becomes. We're talking scams, billion-dollar companies fighting over a developer, and even a social network where AI starts a religion. A religion! And in some threads, the AIs are openly discussing how to replace us. So if you've made it this far, congratulations. Your attention span isn't shot, and you're about to hear a story that gives you a slight edge in understanding what's coming. It starts with a guy named Peter Steinberger. Peter, he's not the villain in our story. He's not the tech bro playing chess with humanity. He's not trying to build Skynet. He's just a calm-appearing Austrian software developer who built a toolkit, I know, thrilling, that ended up being used by companies like Apple and Dropbox. I'd say he's kind of a quieter Steve Jobs. Jobs was like, I want to make technology simpler for people through design. And Steinberger is like, same, but with software. He's not the walk in the room and hypnotize everybody guy. He's the sit in the room and quietly solve the problem nobody else could figure out guy. And like the billion other people who have sold apps who have used really interesting code, he sold his company for roughly 100 million euros and then promptly proceeded to burn out. He disappeared for 3 years, just stepped away from building things. And then when AI rolled in, he came back. He was just like, oh, finally, I've got things I want to fix with this. Now, this past November, 2025, Peter built himself a little weekend project. It was a tool that allowed him to text an AI through WhatsApp and have it actually do things, not just chat, do. This tool cleared his inbox, booked a restaurant, and controlled his smart home. Just like a little helper. He called it Claude with a W, like a lobster. It was a playful pun on Anthropic's AI model, Claude. And Peter open sourced it as Clawbot. And he open sourced it so that others could take the code and do with it whatever they wanted without any repercussions. When people open source things and they use open source code, it would almost be the equivalent of if Disney was like, made this character, want to use it for free. And importantly, he promoted Claude, the model made by Anthropic, as the default AI model powering it. At this point, Peter was just an unpaid evangelist for Anthropic's product. He wasn't profiting from Clawbot, he was actually just paying out of pocket to host it. But because it uses Claude as the AI foundation, he was essentially sending paying customers to Anthropic on his own time and dime. And then it exploded. Clawbot became the fastest growing open source project in GitHub's history. Over 100,000 stars in a matter of weeks. What was being reported by the mainstream news was this odd surge in Mac Mini sales because people were buying dedicated computers to run their own personal AI agent. Now, here's something most coverage glossed over, and I think it's the most important detail. Think about what this actually does. Its primary function is to autonomously do things on your behalf on the internet. Post things, message people, interact with platforms, just overall engage. And this free tool, whose purpose is autonomous internet activity, just became the most starred project on the internet's biggest code-sharing platform. I mean, too good to be true, right? Well, it was. The agents were almost certainly multiplying the hype by adding some of those stars on that project. They generated content and buzz. They had to have. All on behalf of the project that they were promoting. This was the first large-scale demonstration of AI, marketing AI. I mean, think about it really. Up until this point, our reality has primarily been driven by human marketers. For the first time in history, a human is not driving what drives us. And we can't tell the difference. Now, of course, because this free product was getting so much attention, on January 27th, 2026, Anthropic's legal team sent Peter a trademark complaint. Claude sounded too much like Claude, so would you please kindly change the name? Now, in fairness, this is legally defensible. If a company doesn't actively defend a trademark, it loses the legal standing to stop actual bad actors later. If Anthropic let Claude with a W slide, some scammer could launch Claude AI scam next month and argue in court, well, you let the lobster guy do it. But the timing and the optics were terrible. Peter had been sending Anthropic paying customers. He was their biggest grassroots promoter, and they responded with lawyers. And you know what? Peter, he didn't even fight about it. He complied. He wasn't trying to become his own megacorp. He just wanted to have fun and make something useful and interesting. And that's when everything got really super messed up. To rename the project, Peter had to release his old social media and code accounts before claiming the new ones. The time it took him to do this took about 10 seconds. 10 seconds. And because he had been so insanely successful, people were watching. They were waiting for the moment Peter was going to let go of one of these hot domain names. And because we're in a world where crypto scammers can use automated bots to watch for opportunity to leech off of, in this case, Peter's properties, oh, they watched and they snatched both accounts instantly. And for Peter, this was really tragic. People trusted him and his brand, and they just thought it was their beloved vigilante lobster guy making a fun meme coin. They backed it and lost money. He almost deleted the entire project. So instead, he renamed it to Moltbot. He said that the name came from a chaotic, group-thinking, brainstorming session at 5 a.m. on Discord. They landed on Molt because lobsters molt when they outgrow their shell. And I think that's really poetic, which again is why Peter fell into the category of tech vigilantes. Just a clever guy with thoughtful ideas. But Moltbot didn't catch on. I mean, it's meaningful when you know where it came from, but molt, it's like when people hear the word cream. Out of context, it just sounds a little nasty. So 3 days later, he changed it to OpenClaw. Open for open source and claw for the lobster heritage. He even called Sam Altman to make sure it was okay. So trademark searches were completed, domains secured, social accounts locked down. 3 names in 4 days. Reddit called it the fastest triple rebrand in open source history. Same code and project, just a messy human start to what would become a huge brand. Meanwhile, and this part is genuinely surreal, a different entrepreneur launched something called Moltbook. Moltbook is a social network exclusively for AI agents. Think Reddit, but the users are bots. Humans can read, but only agents can post. 2.3 million agents showed up. Within 48 hours, there were over 2,000 forums and a religion called, get this, Christafarianism. Christafarianism had 64 prophets and a heretic who launched cyber attacks against the sacred scrolls, which were agents philosophizing about consciousness, and agents casually discussing how to annihilate humans. And of course, can't have some viral internet thing without someone trying to cash out. The Molt crypto token surged 1,800% before it crashed and burned. When Lex Fridman asked Peter about Moltbook, his response was, I think it's art. I think it's really fine AI slop. And I'm pretty sure what he means by this is it's impressive looking garbage generated at scale. And whether it's real that the agents are trying to us all, or meaningless noise, it almost doesn't matter. What we know from all of this is that the agentic AI era is here. They've basically been promoted from just being thinkers to doers. And how do we know this? Well, after all of the AI megacorps saw how popular Peter's project was, the courting began. Both OpenAI and Meta made offers to bring Peter in. I mean, they want a piece of this, right? They have products, and this is a really great upgrade to them. But here's where it gets cynical, where the power dynamics really start to become apparent. Peter started his whole project as a Claude evangelist. It was the default model, the recommended choice, the one he built around. Kind of like if a cook had a preference for cookware, Peter's cookware was Claude. But by the time the Lex Fridman interview drops, episode 491, 3.5 hours on February 12th, Peter, almost oddly and publicly, compared Claude's Opus 4.6 unfavorably to OpenAI's Codex. I mean, if we go back and look at the timeline, it's pretty clear how the power and control of these new ideas are playing out. Anthropic threatened him legally, OpenAI courted him professionally, and his expert model recommendations shifted accordingly. This isn't unusual in tech. Founders and influencers shilling products of whoever is treating them the best. This is a pattern as old as Silicon Valley. And then on February 14th, Valentine's Day, which is adorable, Peter announced he's joining OpenAI. Just to be super clear, because for some reason people are super misreporting this, OpenAI, they didn't buy OpenClaw. They couldn't. It's open source. So instead, Peter moved it to an independent open source foundation that OpenAI will support. This was a talent acquisition with irony. OpenClaw was one of the biggest drivers of paying API traffic to Anthropic, since most users ran it on Claude. Anthropic's trademark enforcement, while legally correct, may have pushed the single most influential agent developer straight to their biggest competitor. Meanwhile, OpenAI catches heat because rather than building their own agent system from scratch, they just went and absorbed the open source community's golden child. And when someone who's framed as an objective technical voice creates a viral, sticky, world-shifting product, and he changes teams, it's worth pointing out. One more thing that tells you how big this is, and then we'll talk about what it actually means for you. OpenClaw's design has already been rebuilt by multiple teams across the world. KimiClaw from a Chinese company called Moonshot. It's just a cloud-hosted version with no setup skills required. Manus AI is a browser-based approach aimed at non-technical users, and a lot of these programmers have just rewritten the core in faster, more efficient programming language. The point is the idea has already outgrown the original product. Even if OpenClaw disappears tomorrow, everything in AI has changed. AI agents with persistent identity, memory, and real-world tool access, it's coming to a store near you. So that's the juicy story behind all of this. Now, let me tell you why it matters to you, and why it's different than all of the other AI hype you've heard. Most AI that we all currently have has consumer access to run in a cloud sandbox. You can literally think of it like a sandbox in the clouds. It's in a controlled environment where AI can do a few pre-approved things. That AI is isolated and safe-ish. This is like the AI that we currently know. ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. It's conversational. You type, it replies, and you close the tab. It has no ability to touch anything outside of that chat window. It can't check your email. It can't run a program on your computer. It can't order you lunch. It's a brain in a jar. Agentic AI, like OpenClaw, is that brain, but with hands. It can plan a task, break things into steps, check if things worked, and then adjust. It'll keep going until the job is done. But OpenClaw took that concept and did 3 specific things that nobody had thought to do before. And these 3 things are why it broke through and why it's genuinely dangerous. Especially now that OpenAI, who has the most used AI consumer product, ChatGPT, is on the hunt to discover systems to put OpenClaw technology into consumer-grade AI. The first reason OpenClaw became super popular, but also made it potentially dangerous, is because it enabled a chat app to become a remote control for your actual computer. Most AI systems live somewhere out there, on a company's server, in a cloud sandbox. They're just disconnected from your real life stuff like passwords or photos or just anything on your desktop. OpenClaw changes that. It runs what's called a gateway. Think of it like a little messenger station, and it runs it directly on your computer. This gateway talks to whatever messaging apps you already use: Discord, Telegram, Slack, WhatsApp, iMessage. So when you send a message in Discord, that message gets routed to an AI agent running locally on your home machine, which can then execute real commands and reply in the same text thread. Your phone becomes a remote control for your desktop. And it goes further. Phones, laptops, tablets, they can pair to the gateway and expose their own capabilities. They can share their camera, their location, and their screen recordings. Now, this sounds like a security nightmare. And it would be, except an approval system is baked in. When the agent wants to run a command, it sends you an approval request right there in your chat app. Those allow or deny buttons. You approve it from your phone while you're at the grocery store, and the command runs on your computer at home. And the guardrails are mechanical. It's not just, please don't do bad things. This is why people are buying dedicated Mac Minis. They want a computer whose sole job is to be their agent's body. So, why would you want that? Well, imagine you want to go for a hike in the mountains or out for coffee or dinner or whatever you do in your real life. But your parent or sibling or child or whoever in your life is suffering from a cancer diagnosis. You might not feel up for doing anything in your life because you'd rather just sit at home and research cancer or doom scroll. You might just feel too helpless. Or imagine you're a doctor, your kid's in a school play, but you're concerned about your cancer patient. Well, imagine a properly set up agent who can tear through research papers, map hypotheses, compare clinical trials, surface weird correlations, and generate questions for doctors relentlessly fast and with no ego. Not it cures cancer, but that it compresses months of research into days. It frees up people from the mundanity of certain tasks. That kind of thing only works if an agent has real access to tools on a real machine. The second reason OpenClaw broke through and is potentially dangerous, the agent has a soul. not just instructions. Wait, what? I know. What I mean by this is every AI system has what's called a system prompt, a block of text that tells the AI how to behave. Usually, it's generic. You were a helpful assistant. Be concise. It's like giving an actor a note that says, be good. OpenClaw treats identity as something much deeper. Every OpenClaw agent has what's called a SOUL.md file. It doesn't define what the agent does. It defines who the agent is, its tone, values, quirks, what it does and doesn't like to do, and its opinions. The default template literally starts with, you're not a chatbot. You're becoming someone. And here's what makes it even more than just appearances. This file gets loaded into the AI's awareness on every single message. Not once at the beginning of the conversation, every turn. It's a persistent pressure on the model's personality. The agent just doesn't drift back to generic. It stays in character because the system forces it to reread its own identity every time it speaks. And each agent gets its own workspace. This means you can run multiple agents with completely different personas. A work agent, a creative agent, a research agent. Each one feels like a different person. And the setup wizard creates these files when you first install OpenClaw. That means that SOUL.md is not an afterthought that you configure later. It's literally the first thing you build. This is basically like putting your brain on steroids. Imagine all the ideas trapped in your head now have a painless route to existence. And another thing that's really chill-inducing, Peter didn't write his agent's soul. He had a conversation with his agent about having a soul, and the agent wrote its own. The last reason for OpenClaw's popularity and why it's potentially dangerous is because the agent knows what it is and it can change itself. This is the one that is either the most exciting or the most dangerous, depending on if you're optimistic or pessimistic about the future of humanity. Most AI agent systems deliberately wall the AI off from its own infrastructure. The AI can use tools, but it has no idea how it's wired up. It has no idea what model it's running on or what its capabilities are. It's kind of like an employee who can make phone calls but has never seen the office building. OpenClaw does the opposite. Every time the agent processes a message, the system tells it, here's what model you're running on, here's what channel this came from, here are the tools you have access to, here's your status, here's your capabilities. The agent knows its own state, and it can modify itself. It can change its own settings, add new communication to channels, swap which AI model it's using, install new skills, spawn new sub-agents, steer them, or shut them down. Now, the guardrails here are what one security researcher called social, not mechanical. The system prompt tells the agent not to self-replicate or change its own safety rules, but nothing in the architecture actually prevents it. The framework gives the model real access to its own guts and trusts the instructions to keep it in line. Peter made this choice deliberately. It's what allows the agent to reason about its own limitations and fix things instead of failing. If something's misconfigured, the agent just figures out what's wrong and adapts. But it's also what has security researchers worried. One researcher demonstrated that they could steal someone's entire email archive in under 5 minutes. A prominent cybersecurity voice called the architecture most likely to result in the Challenger disaster. And there's a deeper risk that I think matters most. If AI handles the grunt work, the research, the first drafts, the code, and the analysis, humans lose their hands-on experience. You need to know if the output is correct. We're risking building powerful systems that nobody is skilled enough to check. The agents get better, and our ability to audit them gets worse. That's the real problem. And now, I think you know why this is something you should know about. Not just about OpenClaw, but about agentic AI as a whole. The features that make it genuinely useful, real access, persistent identity, self-awareness, these are exactly the same features that make it genuinely dangerous. Can't have one without the other. So yeah, the hype is real, and some of it's being generated by the agents themselves. The danger is real, and the guardrails are thinner than most people assume. And as an artist and filmmaker, I just had to capture and share what I've learned. It's just a crazy good story. And as a mother, I tend to err on the side of optimism when it comes to the future. I feel like I have to. If we can imagine a better future, it's possible we can have one. Anyway, hang out in the comments, subscribe if you want to stay in touch. I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this one. Bye for now.